Avila Church kind of started the ball rolling.
Avila, because of the church partnership.
Avila was hiring a new youth minister for its church, and it ended up hiring John Cox, who was a Young Life affiliate.
I mean, I can't believe it's been 30 years. I mean, it's pretty remarkable to hear the faithfulness that folks have been faithful, support has been faithful, and God's been faithful and blessed in the ministry for all those years. It's really pretty amazing to hear, and it makes me recollect, about that time and kind of have fond memories of my time there, and realize that some of that early labor has resulted in something great is really neat.
I'm going to get emotional telling it.
Because of that church partnership model, really the youth ministry side of that gave me that core of kids to kind of concentrate on. And so I just started developing relationships.
And I continue to tell people every time I get a chance that Young Life is definitely a place to build relationships. I can't say enough about relationships. Young Life does an excellent job of relationships. I think I would have to say again, relationships.
I wanted to be where they were, hanging out at the football stadium in the stands, going to lunches, which was always awkward. One of my favorite things was like stand in the middle of the drum line in the band just for fun sometimes. Going to practices was one of my favorite things because nobody goes to the practices. I mean, their parents don't even go watch them at practice.
I think because so many of our kids today are kind of getting catechized on social media, these relationships, these real life relationships with peers or near peers, is kind of one of the more important ways that they will be open to kind of hearing the truth.
They saw that we really loved them and we were invested in them and we wanted to see them, kind of where they were. And so those were kind of some real good places we were able to connect to students and kind of invest in their lives. So
the leaders did a great job of making a relationship with me, Eddie Long and Cindy both. Man, these adults, they seem to understand what it's like. And that makes a huge difference, especially on a youth, because with everything happening, you feel like nobody understands. You feel like you're isolated and you've got to do all this on your own. And that's not the case. And they were so good at making you feel like that wasn't the case, no matter what was going on. Matthew Rings really sought me out as a student underneath him and met me where I was. I had interests that didn't fall in line with most youth. He really did make me feel like somebody who he wanted to invest time into. And when I was a leader, that's the model I tried to exemplify, that I tried to do. I tried to find kids and find out what it was that they were into that I could relate to, and then try to invest into them with that and show an interest and share that, because it really is about the relationship, and the only way you can get a relationship is finding common ground.
We started Young Life Club, around early '93. We had club, and we had attracted a big crowd right away, and so finding a place to do club was hard, and so that's why we needed space. We needed a place to kind of get 100 kids in a room, and so trying to find that was tough, and that's kind of how we ended up in the storefront location on Main Street there.
The church got its hands on the old Goodyear building, and the building was used for Sunday schools for the youth, and Sunday night programs for the youth, and then rolled into hosting Young Life on Monday nights. My dad was a third owner of that building. Yes, it was split between him and his two brothers. His father owned the building and the station next to it. And then when the church was looking for somewhere to provide a location for youth, he convinced his two brothers to let it go.
You know, it was a challenge to figure out what we were going to do, and what he said, you know, that Pete Coleman owns this building down here that's right around the corner, and so somebody made a call and connected me with Pete, and I went to talk to him, and just remember how generous he was in just saying, sure, you know, like if that's what you guys want to do, just kind of turned it over to us to use for God's glory, you know, which just it's just, you know, amazing that somebody would with those kind of resources would be able to see the vision and be so open to allowing God to use it in that way.
I'll always have to say, if it wouldn't have been for Lewis Davis, Young Life never would have happened the way it did in Newberry. He was a huge sponsor of raising money to renovate that building as a clubhouse. And I always admired Mr. Lewis because he was in his late, probably 60s when he started all this, and up until his 80s, he was still involved with Young Life. So it was a place where kids could come to play, to socialize, to learn, and to experience relationships, and again, hear people give their testimonies and have Bible studies, and again, hear about the gospel and hear people talk about who Jesus Christ is. But it was a fun thing too, you know, basketball court there, game tables, and it's big. To me, that was a big success.
I hated Young Life in high school. I hated it. I got saved probably at the beginning of my senior year, and then I saw all these people, like the football players and whatever, partying on the weekends. They're like, "Oh, we're going to Young Life." I was like, "Oh, they're such hypocrites. I know what you're doing." And it was like, I hated it. Couldn't stand it. So when I got to college, some of my friends introduced me to Young Life and taught me the philosophy of it's the sick who need a doctor, and kind of the light bulb went off. I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. And so I shifted from being like super judgy into finding this passion that Christ has for the lost.
Most adults, when I was involved with it, never knew what Young Life was.
You know, what are you trying to do? Take kids away from the church or that type of thing?
They felt like Young Life was a threat, like we're going to steal their sheep or whatever.
People just didn't understand what Young Life was. And yeah, the people that didn't understand what Young Life was, they thought it was just a church youth group. People wouldn't get involved because they thought it was a territorial thing.
This is just another opportunity to try and reach people with the gospel.
I didn't like Young Life because I didn't understand the vision. Jesus always ate with sinners. If he didn't eat with sinners, he would have been eating alone the whole time. So understanding that mission statement from Christ kind of helps people understand the vision of Young Life, I think.
I would try to encourage the adult, just come in and watch, because I saw so many people change their lives when they did experience club or go to a camp.
I think anybody who actually sits through a full club and realizes how it works and understands the manufacturing of it and why it's built the way it is, I don't think anybody could disagree with it being a great thing.
For me, I always try to build Young Life kind of like the old show Cheers. The motto was, sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name and they're always glad that you came. But building that environment for students is kind of rare, you know, because students are isolated. They're on their phones and they're, you know, in social media, but there's no like central place for them to come and feel connected and cared for and loved and encouraged and accepted unconditionally. And I think if you kind of got that message out to the folks in the community, they would be maybe more supportive.
Young Life is great about providing an environment that is not boring. And one thing that you find, especially with youth, is that if you can get the rambunctiousness out of them, you can sit them down for 20 minutes to tell them something that normally they may consider boring. And if you can get the people who are going to tell the story to do some really ridiculous things first, that helps too. Matthew Rings was a tinkerer, and he liked to mess with stuff.
It was just a small 12-volt battery,
It's the kind of taller, square, rectangular shaped battery that has little coils on top of it.
And then you put it on a bar stool.
2 wires run up to the top of a stool with some 1/4-inch mesh fencing.
Like a piece of mesh would be on each of your butt cheeks.
Either side of your derriere.
And you had like a buzzer.
The first time that the hot seat was introduced to us at club, it had a blanket laid over it so you couldn't see anything. You just knew that they were standing there with a wire in their hand that had a red button on it, and you're like, oh, what is this?
And so we gave them like one of my daughter's Barney puzzles. It takes, it's like got 10, 15 pieces.
It's a little baby puzzle that had like 6 or 8 pieces in it.
And so you said every, 30 seconds, we're going to zap this.
Kelly Lown was the first one to go up. And she sat down and they said, okay, Kelly, you got to put this puzzle together. Every 10 seconds, something will happen that you haven't completed.
But your brain just like locks up and you can't think because you're counting down like the seconds and they're trying to get it put together. And
the first 10 seconds pass, and I think Matt hits the button, and she jumped 10 feet in the air screaming. And from that point on, it was all over. It must have taken her 2 minutes to put that puzzle together, full of screams and hollering. We were just dying laughing. And of course, the hot seat became a to-do for several clubs after that. And nowadays, I don't think you'd have the hot seat put anywhere.
So we did like some fun games with that. But yeah, that one's like totally illegal now, I'm sure. So
the songs and the games and the skits of Young Life were the quote class eliminator. You get into a club and everybody will sit in their little groups, but as soon as the chaos starts up, nobody cares about those groups anymore. Club is still kids getting together, going crazy for a handful of minutes, followed by a skid of foolishness by the leaders who are willing to put themselves out there, and then 15, 20 minutes of one of those leaders taking the big step to step out and share Christ one way or another through some aspect of the Bible.
There was like a group of these skaters that would hang outside of club every week, and they were like they're too cool to come inside. They didn't want to be a part of all the Jesus stuff, and that went on for probably 2 or 3 months. And they were hanging out on the curb, dropping the F-bomb, smoking, making fun of people going into the Jesus thing, and eventually they started coming in like one at a time would come in for club, and then the next week another one would come in, and we just kept loving them while they were outside hanging out, talking to them, accepting them for who they were. And eventually they ended up going to Windy Gap with us, coming inside, being a part of the ministry. And one of the guys texts me probably once or twice every week still. A lot of times we just plant seeds, and sometimes we don't know the effects until they get to college or somewhere else. But we're kind of seeing the transformations, and the kids step up to be leaders and want to lead their friends to Christ. Those are the encouraging times. So.
Let the kids understand that you aren't judging them. Being able to present Jesus to them in a manner that they'll be willing to listen to because they know you're not judging them. Finished up with the talk. We finished up with club. And a few days later, somebody came to me and said, hey, just wanted you to know, there's a girl who came to me and said that because of, I'm going to get emotional telling it, because of your talk that night, she decided to give her life to Christ. And I don't know what I said. I don't know what in it was so moving, but that's the whole point of it. And so I'll never take that for granted.
These students need to know how wildly in love God is with them specifically.
An avenue like Young Life is just a wonderful way to introduce kids to Jesus Christ.
I will say this, I was in youth ministry for about 20 years before I retired. Whether I was in Rock Hill or Newberry or Atlanta or Columbia, the students were always the same. They don't know who they are, they don't know where they fit in, but they just want to fit in, they want to feel accepted. And I think Young Life is a phenomenal tool to kind of really help them through that. And so trying to teach those students their intrinsic value, that they matter to Jesus, that Jesus is wildly in love with them specifically, and building that kind of community at Young Life.
I always told people that Young Life was a way to show kids all about Jesus Christ through the back door. They all of a sudden they understood what love and care and forgiveness and all that stuff was all about just by being part of a group. I mean, those camps are a kid's dream if they ever got to go to it.
We went to Windy Gap. We had a group that came from Mid Carolina with us one time, and they were you could tell they were kind of apprehensive. Oh, we're with these Newberry guys, and the rivalry between the two. And we got to Windy Gap, and we all just meshed right in. And several of them, turned and gave their lives up to Christ and said, I never expected this to be like this. And that's what I miss the most from Young Life and club and camps and stuff like that.
We were at Windy Gap, and Justin Setzler, and we were there like in January, and it was like, snowing. And Justin Setzler had said that he was going to slide down the water slide and they had like a pond, a pool, and it was like, it's January, it was like freezing and snow on the ground and everything. And I said, Justin, what, if you do it, I'll do it. Thinking that, he's not going to do that. Anyway, next thing I know, Justin and a lot of other kids were out there. Yep, they did it. And the next thing I know, the famous quote of that week was where's Greg Summer at? So they wanted to see me go down the slide, but yeah, I decided against it.
We went to Windy Gap. It was a off-season short camp trip over a weekend. I think it was 4 guys who previously had any kind of relationship with Jesus, gave their previous lifestyle to become Christians with a relationship with Jesus. I think that, and I was a student at that time, not a leader. I think that's one of the things that sticks out the most to me. Along, like, holy smokes, yes, what everybody hopes from this, we just watched it unfold, because some people, it may not be till years later, but here we are in the midst of it, in the middle of it, and it happened, and with 4 of them, and that was earth shattering for everybody involved, even them. It was a wild weekend. Young Life isn't just for kids. And the reason I say that Young Life isn't just for kids is because at some point, those youth, and I use the term kids loosely, those young adults that are in club will be adults in the community. And with that understanding, you can't say anything for younger people is only for younger people. It's for the whole community. It's for everybody. It's for their younger siblings. It's for their younger friends and family. It's for their older family members, because we never know if a student who's come to Young Life who's never read a Bible or never heard the story, we don't know if they become a Christian and then go home to their family who's never done any of that. And we don't know if they're the Bible that family reads. It is not a youth-only thing. It is a community thing.
If somebody invites you, give it a try. I heard so many times that a seasoned Young Lifer, if you will, they would give their testimony and say, yeah, so-and-so and so-and-so invited me to come to this thing, and I just thought about it for way too long before I finally stepped in and finally figured out, hey, this is pretty cool stuff. So I would say give it a try. Don't write it off without trying it out and see what it's all about.
just trying to build just a great community of students that came together, that wanted to hang out together and be a community in their schools of Christians to help influence each other and support each other in the school itself.
Newberry was just such a generous community. I loved being, my time in Newberry. One of the things that was amazing about being there is just the closeness of the community, and it seemed like everybody I met had an investment or wanted to help. I don't think I found that anywhere else. Haven't felt anything close to that in terms of that type of close-knit community and that kind of generosity anywhere. So I really miss that.
Hasn't changed.
That's awesome.